The development timeline of the fifth generation of video game consoles, 1998-2006, primarily focuses on the hardware and software innovations of systems such as the Sony PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64. Here's a detailed breakdown. Early development, 1998-1993, 1998-1991. Sony and Nintendo collaborate on the PlayStation, a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES. Sega begins research and development for the successor to the Sega Genesis, Mega Drive. 1992, Nintendo cancels its partnership with Sony and instead partners with Philips, leading to the CDI project. Sony begins reimagining its cancelled project as a standalone console, the future PlayStation. Sega develops two competing projects internally, the Sega Saturn and an add-on for the Genesis, the Sega 32X. 1993, Atari releases the Jaguar, promoting it as the first 64-bit console. The system struggles with developer support and marketing. Sony formally enters the console race, unveiling the PlayStation project. Nintendo begins early planning for the Ultra 64, later renamed Nintendo 64, in collaboration with Silicon Graphics. Launches and the generation's peak, 1994-2000. 1994, Sony launches the PlayStation in Japan on December 3, marking its debut in the console market. Sega releases the Sega Saturn in Japan on November 22, ahead of schedule, to compete with Sony. 1995, both Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn launch in North America and Europe. The PlayStation gains traction due to its ease of development and strong third-party support. The 3D interactive multiplayer, released earlier, 1993, fails to compete with new entrants due to its high price. 1996, Nintendo releases the Nintendo 64 in Japan on June 23 and in North America on September 29. The system introduces analog control and 3D platforming with Super Mario 64. Sony solidifies its lead with blockbuster titles such as Final Fantasy VII and Crash Bandicoot. 1997-1999. Sega struggles with the Saturn's lack of third-party support and poor sales outside Japan. Sony continues to dominate with hits like Gran Turismo and Metal Gear Solid. Nintendo emphasizes first-party games like The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time but faces challenges due to the limited storage capacity of cartridges. Transition to the sixth generation, 2008-2006. 2000, Sony launches the PlayStation 2. PS2, signaling the end of the fifth generation's dominance. However, the original PlayStation continues to sell. Nintendo focuses on its next console, the GameCube, while continuing limited support for the N64. Sega discontinues the Saturn in favor of the Dreamcast, which had launched in 1999. 2001-2003, the PlayStation continues to sell as a budget-friendly option, especially in developing markets. Nintendo ends production of the N64 in 2002, shifting focus entirely to the GameCube. Atari Jaguar becomes largely obsolete by 2001, and the 3D fades from relevance. 2004-2006. Sony officially ceases production of the original PlayStation in 2006. The Nintendo 64 and Sega Saturn retain a niche audience in retro gaming but are no longer supported by their manufacturers. Key innovations of the fifth generation transition to 3D graphics. Systems like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 introduced 3D gaming, redefining the medium. CD-ROM technology. Most consoles adopted CDs, allowing larger storage capacities than cartridges. Analog controls. Nintendo's introduction of the analog stick influenced future console designs. Multiplayer innovations. The Nintendo 64 supported 4-player games, emphasizing local multiplayer experiences. This timeline captures the rise, peak, and decline of the fifth generation, setting the stage for the dominance of the sixth generation. 4.0